Welcome to Obligated, a podcast brought to you by Obligate. We specialise in conversations in careers in law, compliance and governance. Today, I'm joined by Kate Jones, who I've known for a number of years, and she has had a really interesting career in the field of compliance. Kate, thank you for joining me today. I met you a number of years ago, but I don't actually know much about your background, so it'd be great to hear a bit more about that. What were you like when you were little?
There's probably a lot of different answers to that question depending on who you ask, but I would say I have always been very determined in life. I've often known what I've wanted from an early age. I've worked really hard at the things I wanted to achieve in life, and I would say I was quite focused on what I wanted to achieve in life. So I remember I grew up until I was 14 in very rural Suffolk, and I wanted to earn money. So I used to, in the summers, get up at 5 a.m. and go bean picking, which was like 5 a.m. till about 10 a.m. and used to earn about £30-40 cash. And you just had to pick massive crates of beans for Sainsbury's. And I remember my brother did that for one day and said he was too tired, couldn't do it again. But I did it for weeks because it was earning money, and I wanted to earn money, and I wanted to buy things with money. So I had a really lovely childhood growing up. I ended up, when I was 12, going to boarding school to 18, which I loved. I know not everyone loves boarding school, but I absolutely loved it. I thought it was the best thing. Made some brilliant friends, did some phenomenal things, and then ended up going to university after that.
What did your parents do?
So my mum was a nurse and then a health visitor, and my dad was in the military, and then he went into managing. He was like an area manager of pubs for breweries, managing their pubs. So we actually moved when I was 14 to Worcester because he got another job there. But I was already at boarding school then, so actually it didn't make much of a difference moving, because I didn't move schools, I didn't move anything. I just moved house.
So they're in vacations. How did you get into a more professional environment?
So my aunt worked in banking. And so all through my life, I heard about what she was doing and what she wanted to do. And I really liked the sound of it. I loved finance. I loved kind of looking at, I sound very geeky here, but I loved looking at investments. I loved understanding the world of finance. I loved talking to her. So she was really one of my inspirations on what career do I want to do. And I did go to boarding school. I was surrounded by people who naturally, from their family or other reasons, had lots of money. And I decided that in life, I needed to have a job and a career that supported me and that paid for a lifestyle that I would like. And ultimately, I was, there are lots of careers that do that for you. But in my world, I loved finance. And I remember my aunt, when I was about 16 or a bit older, helped me doing some investments. And I ended up doing some share dealing with just a bit of money, but it was in the kind of boom era of online shopping and things. And I ended up, I did a semester abroad in Australia, and I ended up paying for my semester abroad, my flights out there and everything, from money I had made from share dealing. So I just had a natural kind of affinity with finance and the world of, financial markets and the financial world. And that's where I was driven. I always knew that's where I wanted to work.
So you started out risk-taking, even though you went into compliance?
Yes. So I went into compliance because I had done a management science degree at Southampton, and I loved it. It was very economics-based, and it was all about businesses. We did accounting, we did economics, we did commercial aspects of business, we did futures and options. I did a huge range of courses there, and I loved that. But I felt that I wanted to do the legal side of business. So I ended up doing a master's at Bristol, which was basically the 3-year law degree in 2 years. And I loved law as well. But the problem was I didn't love an area of law enough to specialise in it. So I decided actually I wanted to do something that used both my management science degree and my legal degree. And I just happened to go to the careers office at Bristol, and they said, well, have you thought of compliance? I didn't know what compliance was, hadn't heard of it before, but I did some research and I thought, actually, this sounds a really interesting area, because I wanted to work in a business. So I wanted to be part of seeing a business grow. I wanted to be part of a business, to the intricacies of how it all works, but I wanted to use my legal kind of knowledge and brain as well, and compliance seemed the perfect opportunity.
So on that subject, what does compliance mean to you?
So I do love compliance, as many people will tell you. But the reason I love compliance is because I think it's a very dynamic career. You have to think on your feet nearly every day. No day is the same. You are often using a complete myriad of skills. You're using negotiation, you're using influencing, you're using problem solving, your time management needs to be really, really excellent, your deadline management. And actually, it comes down to having to really work with people. And I love working with people. I love talking to people. I love getting on with people. You have to build strong relationships to do compliance. And so really, I feel like the skill sets I have and the things I enjoy doing very much tailor to a role in compliance, because it really is a myriad of tasks, a myriad of roles, and but you can see actually the outcome from what you're doing often in compliance, because you are part of a wider business strategy or part of a wider business decision, and that's also nice to see the outcome of things as well, which I really enjoy.
For those people in our audience who aren't familiar with compliance, how would you describe it to them?
So, at a very high level, if someone said to me, "What is compliance?" I often say it's about making sure the firms you work in, because usually you're in-house, stay compliant with the rules and regulations that apply to them. And in today's financial world, the rules and regulations that they need to comply with are a complete myriad, depending on what they're doing, where they're doing it, and who they're doing it for. So, for example, if you're in a consumer business, which is selling to the likes of you and me as a consumer on the ground, the regulations are extensive, very, very, very extensive. And so your compliance function will often be quite big, will need quite a lot of technical knowledge and have quite a lot to manage, versus you could be doing compliance in a firm where it's, for example, wholesale, so dealing with other businesses or large entities. Compliance is still there, but it's perhaps a different guise. So compliance in different businesses is set up slightly differently. They have different reporting lines, different ways of doing, but ultimately the job and the skill set you need, in my mind, is the same.
And we often talk about compliance culture. How would you describe that?
So I am a big, firm believer in compliance culture is absolutely core in having, being able to do your compliance job. So compliance culture is everyone understanding the reasons that they need to do something and everyone believing in those reasons. And if you don't have a strong compliance culture in a firm, it's really hard to do compliance, because it's a bit like, it's the line I often use with a lot of people is like, the lowest thing you accept in a company is where your compliance culture is set. So if you accept people coming in late all the time, that's really the culture that you're setting. If you accept people kind of breaking the rules all the time, that's the culture you accept. So compliance culture isn't a standalone thing. It's part of a wider culture, but it needs to be, for you to do your job well in compliance, it needs to be really ingrained in a business. And I have been very fortunate, as you know, because I've worked with you, to work in companies where the compliance culture has been really strong. And it is such a joy to work in those environments, to work with those kind of people, and to really kind of build a business and see a business grow, because those are the roles that are like the gold dust out there. And there are a lot of companies that don't have a very strong compliance culture or don't really believe in compliance. They often will say they want to do compliance, and there's lots of words around compliance, but really they don't really want to engage in being compliant. They want to do what they want to do. And those firms, it's really hard to do a job in compliance, because you're basically constantly hitting a brick wall where people aren't really engaged in, unfortunately, what they do have to do, whether it be through a rule, whether it's through a law, whether it's through, a policy or a procedure or a standard. It's really hard to get people to engage in that kind of thing.
And it's a top-down activity. So, so often you see compliance sort of being pushed to one side or being given a segregated area, not in the business. And those are the areas where I see a bit of a problem.
Yeah. I mean, the way I would describe it in a lot of places is people like compliance to be in the shop window. They like to put them on the website. They like to have the shop window as pretty as they can. If you've got investor meetings, they want compliance in the meeting to show you've got them. But once you open the shop door and go inside, people aren't that engaged in compliance. And for anyone out there in compliance, I'm sure they can relate to this. But also, if you're looking for a job in compliance, it really is important to find the right fit for you and find the right company that really does engage in compliance and really does understand the value in it, because there is a huge amount of value. I know, the kind of default everyone goes back to is like what firms have been fined or what people have been struck off. That is ultimately the worst sanction you can end up with. But a compliance culture is also good at instilling behaviours in people. It's good at promoting behaviours. It's also good at, enforcing where people don't meet those behaviours. Maybe they're not in the right firm and maybe they shouldn't be there. It also creates a strong culture. It also creates a kind of understanding of everyone. They know what is expected of them. So I think building and retaining a really strong compliance culture in a firm is key. And wherever I've worked or whoever I work with now, having a strong compliance culture or building a strong compliance culture is something is a core value of mine, because I think it's so important to be able to do your job well.
It's about doing the right thing, and that enables business. So often compliance is seen as the police, and it shouldn't really be, because the team is there to support the business and making sure there's a business today and tomorrow.
Yes, and I think that's a prime example of where you can tell where a firm is. The firms that are like, oh, we need a compliance, but it's the function that says no, or it's the function, we'll go to them when something's gone terribly wrong. In my view, compliance should be embedded throughout your business. It should be embedded in those strategic decisions, because are you trying to do something that actually has a huge lift when it comes to regulatory requirements? And actually, that is a large cost to any project. Are you, does your strategy involve an area where actually there's a lot of compliance requirements that you need to be aware of now, because you can't roll it out in the way you've rolled it out in other areas. You need new systems, or you need new abilities to do things, or your policy documents or anything needs to be completely different. So my view is that compliance really needs to be involved really at board level down throughout the business, because actually that's where we add value. And another thing I'm very strong on in compliance is being proactive in compliance is so much more valuable than being reactive. It's so much cheaper. It adds so much more, because actually you can advise early on, you can put things in place, you can engage with people, you can explain things. Whereas reactive is often where it's gone wrong or it's about to go wrong. And sometimes when you're in a reactive place, it can be in a dire position, like the regulator has come in and asked you a question and you can't answer it. Or someone's already engaged with the regulator and said completely the wrong thing. Trying to unpick those things in a compliance function is extremely arduous, extremely hard work. And
costly.
Yeah, ultimately, it costs a lot more money. And again, I think a lot of firms out there don't really understand that. Compliance is there. Something's gone wrong, get compliance in. Like we are the police, or we are the kind of, cleaners to come and clean up a mess. Actually, not doing it in the first place because you understand the importance of it, or the regulator phoning you and you immediately phoning the compliance function and saying, someone's phoned me and asked these questions, how do I answer them, can save you an awful lot of time and money, because we will understand why the regulator's asking that question. We will understand the regulations, and actually being able to advise you before you have a call with them is of optimum value to most firms.
And it works both ways. So both the organisation but also the compliance team have a responsibility to build a culture. And the compliance team has to have a brand which is signalling that it is approachable and it's there to support the business rather than being a blocker.
Yes. And I've worked in one place and someone came up to me and said, we've never worked with anyone in compliance like you before. You're really friendly. And I thought, well, I don't know where you've worked before, because, but I like to build relationships with people. I like to be open and honest. And, I always say the classic, there's never a stupid question. I ask a million questions because to do my job well, I need to actually really understand what your drivers are, what your intent is, your timeframes, exactly what you want to do. Because sometimes in compliance, it's the minutiae that you need to understand to give the answer, not the high level, we want to do X, Y, Z. It's actually, how do you want to do it? Where do you want to do it? What method do you want to do it in? Are you doing it purely digital? Are you doing it with call centres? Are you doing it from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction? It's things like that actually allow you to give value, because you need to understand that.
What's your compliance career look like?
So, as I've said already, I wanted to do a career in compliance, and I do recognise that a lot of people who do compliance nowadays always seem to have fallen into it. Like they came into work one day and suddenly were doing a job in compliance. But I, like I said, when I was at Bristol and the quiz officer said, "Have you thought of compliance?" I researched jobs and I thought, actually, this sounds a really interesting area that I would like to do. So I approached some recruiters when I'd finished or nearly finished my master's and said, are there any jobs out there? And actually, it was slightly ironic, my first job that I got, because I had gone to a recruiter that did banking compliance. And he said to me, "We've got this company, they would like to meet you." I'm not sure if he truly said to me at that time they were an insurance firm. But I remember I remember turning up in the interview and the first question they said was, "Why do you want to work in insurance?" And I remember thinking in my head, insurance? What?
And this was probably pre lots of information being available on the internet.
Yes. And so I obviously somehow answered the question. I can't remember exactly how I answered the question, but the interview seemed to go really well and they offered me a job, which was brilliant. So I started my career in an amazing company that I absolutely loved, which was a Lloyd's of London insurance syndicate and a London market insurance syndicate with lots of entities throughout Europe. And so hence I predominantly since then have had a career in insurance. I have done about 4.5 years for a real estate group of companies that have done things like commercial real estate lending, mortgage administration, like funds, real estate funds. So that was a slightly different sector, but also equally really interesting to understand. And then for the last nearly 4.5 years, just over 4.5 years, I've run my own compliance consultancy we run a business with another lady and both of us work together, but she focuses on marketing, employee brand, and I focus on compliance.
How have you balanced your career with motherhood? Because you've held some very senior roles.
Probably like everyone out there who is doing it today, it is a real juggle. And I mean a real, like, in-your-face juggle. I think no matter what anyone tells you or what you read or what you think it's going to be like, it never is like that at all. So a prime example today, we've arranged to do this podcast. My daughter has sent me an email this morning saying she feels sick and can I pick her up? Well, no, I can't pick her up because I am here and my husband can't pick her up either. So there is always a constant juggle on a daily basis with children. But one of the things I remember before I had children is I went to a talk and it was Lloyd's of London were doing a diversity week. It was the first time they'd done it. And the talk was on how have people got to senior positions in insurance while having children. And so I went to this talk because I thought this will be really insightful. And there were 3 women on the panel. And the first lady said, "We have a full-time nanny. We pay gym membership. We take her on holiday. We do everything for her. My husband works. He's got a senior position. I've got a senior position. And so we just need to keep the nanny. The nanny is wonderful." And my husband says to me, "Don't worry about missing things for your children. It's fine. We just accept that because of our job." And I thought, well, that's not really an inspirational message. So firstly, I am full-time. I'm at work most of the time. My nanny is bringing up my children. I'm not that present, and I've got to a position where I'm very fortunate to afford a full-time nanny because, to be honest, a full-time nanny for most people is unachievable, both from a practicality but ultimately a cost point of view. For most people, a full-time nanny is their salary. So you can't. So I thought, well, that's a slightly unhelpful comment. And then the second lady said her advice was, again, very senior position. She said, "My husband doesn't work at all. My children call him mummy and he does everything." And I thought, well, again, that's not really helpful because you've had a career because your husband has given up whatever
and
was
most
his career.
People have to have 2 parents who are working.
Yeah. And so he's at home all the time. So in a way, you've managed to build a career because you've had the support at home from your husband that you've needed to do it. And I thought, well, that, again, doesn't really jump out at me as the ultimate solution. And then the third lady said, "I have a husband who mostly works at home. I think she had 5 children. And every child, I had 3 months off of maternity. And then I had every other Friday off from that point going forward with my children." And I thought, and again, all these women, very inspirational, had got to very senior roles in the insurance sector, but they didn't inspire me at all and make me feel that really the possibility of having a job and children could work, to be honest, because I thought, I don't have the funds to pay for a full-time nanny, and I don't want to have children to have a full-time nanny. My husband isn't going to give up his career to be at home with the children. I wouldn't want him to do. And I don't want to be, having such a short maternity leave or whatever, or only having one day off every 2 weeks to spend time with my children again. So I just thought, I took that away thinking, well, that's not very inspirational. But I have to say, I've kind of just built my own path with having children. Coming back to firms, compliance cultures and firms, I have been very fortunate to work in firms that have been very supportive of people having children, both parents, not just people on maternity, and that has made an absolutely huge difference because they've really supported me coming back to work. They've valued my input when I've come back to work. Mm-hmm. They've given me flexible working. So after my first child was born, I have predominantly only worked 4 days a week. I've always had Fridays off. So some days I did have to be in London, and we did have to find some childcare arrangements. We've had nannies, we've had childminders, we've had au pairs, we've had various things, but we've only had them for a part of the week when we've had key days where both of us can't be around. Mm-hmm. And my husband was in the military, so he did move a lot. That was another reason we needed childcare, but I never moved. We've always lived where we live. My children have all been to the same school. So for them, they've had a lot of stability, which was one of the key things I wanted for them. I didn't want to be moving around the country every 5 minutes, and I couldn't have done my career. But I think after my third child, the realisation that the commute to London, the juggle of work and children was just really, really too much with 3 children. Mm. And I've chosen to have 3 children, but at the end of the day, they're three different ages, 3 different personalities, all have different hobbies, interests. They're all at 3 different schools. So that's why in fact, both Anna and I, because coincidentally she has 3 children as well, we started KANA because we wanted to have a period of our lives where we could have more control and flexibility over when we worked. In some cases, who we worked for, when we worked, what we did. And so that's for the last 4.5 years. I have been able to achieve that, which has been phenomenal. I have been very present for my children as much as I possibly can be. We've had a nursery for my youngest, but apart from that, we haven't had any childcare, which has been brilliant. But I basically just have forged my own path because I don't think for any parent out there is a right answer. There isn't a solution really for anyone, but it's about what works for you. And sometimes you think one thing works and it doesn't. You just have to change it. But as Kate sat here, having children hasn't changed my career ambitions. Your ambition doesn't go anywhere. And that's, for a lot of people as well, I think as soon as they have children, everyone assumes, well, you used to have a career, you used to have aspirations of a career, and suddenly you've had children and that obviously has to take a back seat. But it doesn't. You can still be ambitious. You can still be ambitious for both you and your career, but you have to do it in a way that
suits you
and is cognizant that you have chosen to have children and that you do have children, and that actually the window when they want you present in their lives, really present, is very small now. I've got a teenager now and she is very independent. She doesn't want me cuddling her every 5 minutes. She doesn't want me in her face every 5 minutes. The conversations we have is about, she's got play rehearsal and she needs dropping and she needs someone to make her a packed lunch. They're the conversations.
Practical
conversations. So, the older the children get, what they need from you is also different. But I feel very strongly about being present for my children. And it doesn't mean I'm there all the time. And like today, she says she's ill, she wants picking up from school. I can't be there. That's just a fact of life. I can't do anything about that, but I try my best to juggle. It often doesn't work, but I do my best.
And you're also a role model for them.
Yes, and that's, I do want them to see that, I'm a female and I'm not, it could be a dad who's a single parent. I want to see a role model where actually you can have a job and you can achieve things, and ultimately it does benefit your life working one way or another. And it doesn't mean you need to work full time. You could have an 8-hour week job. It doesn't matter. But actually, and I need that for myself. I want to be Kate. I want to add value to things. I want to see my output. I don't want to be known continually as X's mum. And that's my new persona. I do want to still be the original me who had a career, who had ambitions from early on, who knew where I wanted to go in life. And like I said, having children hasn't changed that for me. Like, I am still that ambitious person. I still want to achieve things.
And I certainly haven't seen you slow down at all. I've known you for 13 years now, and I haven't seen that sort of stagnation in your ambition. But you're now running your own business, as you mentioned, KANA. How does that differ from being full-time employed or part-time employed?
Part-time. So the main driver for starting KANA, to be honest, was the juggle wasn't working for me. In coming into London, we all know children in school, they usually start, the earliest one of the schools starts is 8:15. But if you're commuting into London, which I am, which is about a 40 to 50-minute commute, and that's just into a London station, not even into the office, you can't get there for 9 o'clock. And then school finishes, in most cases, like a primary, is like 3 o'clock, 3:15. Again, you can't be there for that. And if you're in London, you're basically going to turn up in the office for 2 hours before you have to turn around and go home. So after I had my third child, the juggle was just, we both, my husband and I, and again, my husband is hugely hands-on, hugely supportive, which again, I think makes a huge difference. He's not in our world. His job is the most important thing in the world, and I'm just doing a little kind of sideline activity. Both of our jobs are important, and there are times where one of us has to give and the other has to give, and it's not. And I think that's really important to kind of mention as well, that you do need to have kind of open and honest conversations with your other parent or your other caregivers in your life,
support network,
to understand. Because I would say as well, when you have children, everyone needs to change their attitude. It's not your job as a mum to be present, and it's not the dad's job or the other parent's job to go to work. At the end of the day, you are both parents responsible for a child, and therefore both your outlooks need to change. And I think that was a really, for both of us, it was a learning curve, but I think that's really important to support your career. But no, with KANA, so about 4.5 years ago, the juggle, it just wasn't working. And I was in a company working with Anna. She was head of marketing and comms, and I was head of risk compliance. And we just ended up having a conversation one day, and she said, I really want to start a business. And I said, well, that's really random, because I really want to start a business. So we ended up just spending lots of time talking about it. We had never been consultants before. We had no clients because we worked in-house. And we literally started with a pad and a pen. We had no IT. We spent about 8 weeks choosing a name, which was ridiculous. But we were just it's
the fun part.
It's the fun part. But we just so wanted to get it right. And it was probably the most scariest leap I've ever taken in my life, because, when you've got children already, and when you're in your 30s, you've got a lot of costs coming out, It's not like you can go, I've got loads of money here, there and everywhere, because you often haven't. So quitting a job to start a business where you have no obvious income stream, no clients, no equipment, no real understanding of where you're going to find any of these from, it is horrifically scary. But it's been the most amazing journey to do with someone. So having Anna, both equally, her to me and me to her, has been phenomenal. And we just had to work really hard. We networked with everyone we'd ever worked with. We literally put feelers out to everyone. And the most amazing thing is that all the people we contacted or we said we're doing this were hugely supportive and actually recommended us to people. And we just organically grew through our network, which was such a privilege, because, to be honest, and everyone will know out there, if you've worked with someone who's terrible, you're not going to be recommending them. So it was so nice.
It's validation.
Yeah, it was so nice that everyone was like, we're happy to recommend you. And so we organically grew the business through just recommendations. And then when we got some clients, they'd recommend us to other people. And that's kind of how the business has grown. And, we started with our mantra, because both of us can't afford to not work, unfortunately. I would love to just poodle around at home, dog walking and
I'm not sure you would.
drinking coffee. I might do it a few days a week, but I just, I didn't have the option of not working. It wasn't a possibility for me. So, and it wasn't a possibility for Anna. And that was a really kind of ingrained driver in both of us, that we had to make it work. But also it allowed us more control over our time. It allowed us more control over when we work. And as I regularly keep having to say to my children and my husband sometimes, and not in a bad way, but I have to say, like, flexible working isn't no working.
No.
Like, the concept that, yes, I can be at a sports day on a Wednesday morning for something doesn't mean that then I don't need to work later in the evening. And I think that, again, was a bit of a lifestyle change, particularly my husband, because he's like, oh, you're working again. And I'm like, so sometimes I was working 9, 10 at night, 11 o'clock, which just to get work done, because at the end of the day, flexibility is about working more when you want to work, but it's not working at all, particularly when you've got clients who want things to deadlines or need advice or want a phone call. Like, you have to get on with it, and you're not going to retain clients, and they're not going to recommend you if you don't do a very good job for them. So it was a juggle in the beginning, again, trying to do that. But the realization, I think, for all of our family is, like, sometimes mummy's at work. If the door's shut here or she's at the desk, mummy's at work. That's how it is. And sometimes they still come in. Sometimes people crawl along the floor. I'm on a video call and I get these random notes pushed up to me while they're kamikaze across the floor to say, can I eat a snack, or various things. I still get that. But it has allowed me with, and it has allowed Anna as well with KANA to actually kind of control our destiny. And ultimately, I work with some absolute brilliant clients now. Love working with them. They're firms that really value compliance, and they are firms that appreciate compliance. And it's quite a privilege to work with firms like that, because, like, as we've discussed before, it's not always the case.
Yeah. You've really let up when you've been talking about your business. It's really nice to see.
Yeah, I'm very passionate. I mean, our literal mantra was we need to make a profitable business. Like, we'd never done businesses before. Obviously I've done the theoretical side of businesses. I'm very good at finance. I understand all of that stuff. But, it's still actually, how am I going to find people who want to pay me money to do work for them? And that, to be, like I said, was one of the scariest things, and it brings out in you the most horrific imposter. It's awful. Anna and I have been on the biggest imposter journey, and sometimes I had crashed, then she'd be talking me out of it, then she'd crash and I'd be talking her out of it. And that's why it's been such an amazing journey to do it with her, because I think actually having someone alongside you to build a business adds so much value, because there are so many times where you think, am I doing a good job? What if this client doesn't like it? Or what if this, or what if that? And a lot of the time, people are asking you to do things that you maybe never done before, like in a compliance world. And you have to say, yes, I can do that. And then go away and work out how you can do it. And I think in the beginning, that was another big learning curve, is wherever you've worked, or whatever you've done in compliance, you've never done everything. So I had someone recently asking me for some really intricate advice about whistleblowing. Now, I know about whistleblowing, you know about whistleblowing, but the level of intricacy they wanted on whistleblowing was extensive. And I literally had to, like, stick my head in the rules and regs to a point that I thought, there's nothing more to know about whistleblowing to answer these questions. But it's things like that where someone says, can you do it? And in the past, the imposter in you would have said, I mean, I can give you a high-level overview. I can tell you what process and procedure you need, but I can't tell you intricacies of the law.
Or you'd have someone else to refer to.
Yeah. Or you'd say, this person is an expert. You would often have skill sets or somewhere else. Whereas now, when you run your own business, ultimately, you have to be able to say yes to things and then work out how to do it. And that is, even now, is a scary outcome, because you can do it. And I think that's another thing, like, belief in yourself is another strong attribute you need to acquire. You can do it, but you've just got to go away and work out how to do it without making that visible to the client.
So you also co-run a compliance forum with E3CT, the compliance training organisation. Tell us a bit about that.
So when I started KANA, one of the big things both Anna and I did was network like crazy. Just, on LinkedIn, talk to people, have calls with people who've started a business, talk to them. So Steve was, I don't know how I connected with him on LinkedIn. I did. And he said, if you want to call, I run a business. If you want to talk about it, give me a call. So we ended up having this brilliant call. And Steve is such an amazing person as well, like really, really generous with his time. And he's a big supporter of me, but he's a great supporter of people. Like he's such a great person to know. And he was already running a legal group for people who do compliance in law firms.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I'm thinking of doing one in financial services. Would you be interested in co-hosting it with me? So I thought that'd be lovely. So the idea of the forum is to bring people together who work in compliance. So there is no agenda. This is not business development for me. It's not business development for him. It's just... because often compliance can be a lonely field. Often you can be one person in a business, two people in a business. Your culture, as we've talked about, can be very different firm to firm. So the idea of the forum is we discuss things that are relevant to compliance. We discuss topics. We get different speakers in. But it's just to bring people together and share ideas and talk about stuff. And we run it on Zoom every other week. The last one was yesterday. And we've actually met some great people through that as well who are... It's all different sectors. So we've had people in pensions. We have a lady who comes who works in a car auction firm. We have a complete range of people, but it's just really nice. And then twice a year, we tend to run an unconference in person, usually in London. And they have been brilliant. And I'd never heard of an unconference before until Steve said, let's do an unconference. And I was like, what's that? Sounds a bit weird. But I actually am a huge fan of an unconference now because it's basically you set the agenda on the day about what people want to talk about. And I'm sure everyone can relate to the concept. You go to a conference and you think the first session I love, the second session no, the third session no, the fourth session's great. Whereas in an unconference, everyone who attends chooses topics and you have a range of topics per session and you go to the one that you want to go to that's most relevant to you. And they've been a huge success since we've run those. And it's been, really nice. I've met some great people. Made some brilliant connections. And again, I want to do it because I feel like it's really needed in the world of compliance. This isn't about my business or getting clients or anything like that. It's just I'm a big believer in giving back as well as, doing things that are business related.
They've been great. So I've really enjoyed them. And it's a great opportunity to meet new people, network, talk about key topics in the market. So absolutely brilliant.
Oh, thank you. Glad you enjoyed it.
What would you say to somebody who wanted to set up their own business?
So the first thing I would probably say is it's not an easy road to go down, but it is the most rewarding road to go down. So it's a bit like cost benefit. It's going to be really hard, but it will be massively rewarding. I would say before you start the business, be very clear on what you want from the business. And I think it's important to really understand that and have that as your vision in some cases. So for me, as I've talked about, I really needed flexibility with being a parent. That's what I needed. The strict hours in an office, the location of the office were just getting too much. But I also knew I had to earn a certain income. So actually, I went away and my husband and I sat down, went through all our costs and thought, what's the absolute minimum I need to earn to bring into the house? So I had a vision of what I needed to earn. Because if at the end of the day, what you need to earn is humongous at starting your business and is going to be a long journey for you to get to that amount of money. And I'm not saying that you can't, but when you run a business, there's lots of costs as well that come from it. So it's a lot of people think if I get paid £1,000, I can take £1,000 out of the business. Well, actually, you can't because mostly 20 to 25% of that will be allocated to corporation tax.
Yeah.
Let's say your costs of your business are 20%. And then whatever you take out of the business, whether you take it out salary or dividend, you're then paying personal tax on it. So all in all, running a business isn't a sudden money-making way of getting loads of money rather than being employed.
Mm.
So you really need to be clear on what your goals are for starting your business and recognise that you are going to have to take a backseat in terms of what you're earning, a backseat in terms of that stability that you had in a firm. But be very clear that it is a massively rewarding thing to do. You own something, you represent something, you control what that business means. So in KANA, we're really strong on values. And a lot of people in compliance are very strong on values. So we are very strong on being honest to people. We are very strong on building partnerships. We are very strong on supporting people. We have very strong values in our business because that's what we represent and that's what we wanted our business to represent.
Mm-hmm.
So we're no longer working with people whose maybe their values don't align with ours. We're working for our own values that we believe in. So I would say, if you want to start your own business, go for it. But don't think it's an easy option in the sense of you can switch from one to the other. It is hugely rewarding in a multitude of areas, but it is also extremely, extremely hard work to get you where you want to go. But I wouldn't put that off. But I think the way you get there is by being very clear on what you want from it, being very clear on where you're going with it, being very clear on what it represents to you, and always having that as your beacon in building your business. And I have just recently got a business coach. I've never had a business coach before.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had her for about a month and a bit. Because before that, Anna and I actually would coach each other whether we realised we were doing that or not. And that has been really rewarding. And some people start with a business coach because they're not sure of their ideas, and there's nothing wrong. It's where you feel you need support and how you need that support is kind of an individual journey on you. But I would say overall it's one of the most rewarding things I've done in my career because it is me. It represents me, it represents Anna, it represents what we believe in. We have built some brilliant clients who value what we give, and I think actually feeling valued and feeling appreciated and seeing the value for me is a really strong kind of outcome that I want to receive from the work I do. And that's what I do get from running my own business.
You mentioned coaching, and that plays a really good role in helping individuals or businesses achieve their future goals. But sponsorship is something that we think about when it comes to employment. So by sponsorship, I mean situations where a senior member of staff helps advocate for a junior member of staff and promote them in context of meetings and other situations to help them be seen.
Yeah.
What role has that played for you?
In my career, I have been hugely privileged to have bosses and teams and people who have been massively supportive of me, who have championed me and championed many others, because the environment is very supportive. And I've been very lucky to work in firms that really value their people. And I think that has been a huge reason why I've been able to achieve what I've achieved in terms of roles and careers and things, because ultimately you need that support. You need that wider promotion. You need that person that says, you can do this. For example, I've been able to go to Singapore on a secondment because someone promoted me to do that. I feel like that is such a core thing. Like self-belief is one thing, but actually belief in a wider firm, in your capabilities, in what you can achieve is so important as well.
Thank you, Kate. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast today.
Thank you
for joining us today. Please subscribe, like, and follow for more content.